My name is Audrey Hardin. I'm 30 years old. And last week, my 6-year-old daughter Lily got slapped across the face by my older brother, while my entire family watched and laughed. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of heat or chaos. It was deliberate. It was filmed. And it was applauded. And yet, if I'm being honest, what hurt me the most wasn't that moment. It was the silence afterward. The silence that said, "This is normal." The silence I grew up in. But this time, I didn't stay silent. This time, I made sure the world would see what kind of legacy my family was proud of. I made sure every second of their cruelty, their hierarchy, their rot was exposed. If you've ever been the scapegoat in your own family, if you've ever been told you were too sensitive, or that it's just a joke, if you've ever stood in a room full of people who were supposed to love you and realized you were utterly alone, then this story is for you. If you've ever been made to feel small around your own blood, hit that like button. And if you know what it's like to rebuild yourself from scratch, to protect your child like a lioness, and to turn pain into fire, subscribe. Because this isn't just a story, it's a reckoning. Now let me take you to the beginning, because it wasn't always like this. We were the model family in Easton Heights, 4-bedroom colonial, pristine lawn, church every Sunday, and photo-perfect Christmas cards mailed out in bulk. My father, Robert Hardin, was a respected attorney and senior partner of Hardin & Lowe. My mother, Eleanor, was the charming homemaker with her signature lemon pie and pearl necklace. My older brother, Derek, was the golden boy all-star athlete, straight-A student, social butterfly. And then there was me, Audrey, the second child, the disappointment, the one who didn't smile enough in pictures. Growing up, I learned very early that love in our household came with asterisks. If you were impressive enough, obedient enough, palatable enough, then you earned your seat at the table. If not, you were tolerated, at best. I remember asking my mom at 8 years old why Derek got a new bike for no reason. Her response, "Because he's dependable. Audrey, you still need to prove yourself." The favoritism wasn't subtle. It was orchestrated. Report cards were war zones. Derek could bring home a B and get a "we're proud of you." I brought home an A- in math once and got "so what went wrong here?" I was expected to fail. And when I didn't fail, it made them uneasy, because I wasn't playing the role they'd written for me. At 15, I got a partial scholarship offer to a summer writing camp at Columbia. I was ecstatic, but when I brought the letter home, I found it crumpled in the trash the next day. Dad said, "That kind of thing isn't practical. Audrey, you need to focus on things that matter, like getting a job, maybe becoming a paralegal. You're not like Derek." He said it so casually, as if that was a fact of nature, not a choice they made every single day. I left at 18, not with fanfare, not with a graduation party like Derek had, just a duffel bag, one suitcase, and a bus ticket. I supported myself through community college and then state university, waitressing, freelance gigs, a little bit of food stamps, and somewhere along the way, I met Jason. He was kind, in the way men are when they find women already bruised. We married too fast. I was 20, he was 24. We had Lily when I was 24. Jason left when Lily was 2. To be fair, he never pretended to be strong, and I didn't expect him to stay, because by then, I'd already learned the rule: the only person who will protect your child is you. For years, I avoided my family. They didn't ask. I didn't offer. Until 2 months ago, when I got an email from Derek, subject line, "Let's reconnect." He wrote that Dad wasn't doing well, that Mom missed Lily, that they were organizing a family reunion at the lake house. "Let Lily meet her roots," he wrote, Family's family. I almost deleted it. But then I looked at Lily painting in the corner, humming her little made-up songs, and I thought maybe she deserves a bigger family than just me. So I said yes. The moment I pulled into the gravel driveway, I felt it, like my lungs forgot how to breathe. The house was the same. The white shutters, the American flag, the perfectly mowed lawn. But something about it felt hungry, like it had been waiting for me. Derek came out to greet us, arms open, camera crew behind him. Still dramatic, huh? Sis? He laughed, giving me a one-arm hug. Apparently, he was filming a family docuseries, something about legacy. He had sponsors, even said it would be a time capsule for future generations. All I heard was, he wants to control the narrative. Everything felt staged. We had assigned mealtimes, coordinated outfits for family portraits, and Lily was the only child not given a matching polo shirt. At dinner, my mother leaned across the table and whispered, "You might want to remind Lily not to interrupt the grown-ups." Lily hadn't spoken once that entire meal. Natalie, Derek's wife, was the only one who seemed vaguely human. She slipped me a cookie in the kitchen when no one was looking and said, "You're brave for coming." And then there was Paul, my Aunt Linda's husband, a quiet guy with a camera and a conscience. He was filming everything, but unlike Derek, he wasn't performing. He was documenting. He looked at me once, when Lily was being ignored again, and whispered, "Don't worry, I keep backups." It happened on day 3, breakfast buffet, family all around, cameras rolling. Lily was humming her favorite tune when she made up, and then she sang it, a soft, sweet melody. Home is where your heart doesn't hurt. Derek stood up. "Lily," he snapped. "Enough, sit down. You're being disruptive." She looked up, confused, but I was just slap, across the face, the kind of slap that silences an entire room. The only sound after was my mother's soft chuckle. She needed that, boundaries. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember grabbing Lily, but I do remember looking straight into the camera and saying, "Good. Make sure this part makes the final cut." I didn't sleep that night, not a wink. Lily lay curled against me in the guest bedroom, her tiny frame rising and falling with each uneven breath. There was still a faint red mark on her cheek, faint but unforgettable. I kept replaying it, frame by frame, as if that could somehow dull the edges of what had happened. The sound of Derek's hand, the collective breath held at the table, my mother's twisted little chuckle. I'd lived in this kind of violence before, not always physical, but never absent either. It had just changed form over the years, slipping into words, silences, expectations. But for Lily, it was her first time being hit by someone who called themselves family. And I'd let it happen. That was the hardest part to swallow. I brought her here. I tried to believe they had changed. I traded my instincts for the illusion of reconciliation. And Lily paid the price for that delusion. In the darkness, I heard the soft click of a door opening down the hallway. I stayed silent, listening. Footsteps quiet, careful. Someone wasn't sleeping either. I slipped out of bed, tucked the covers around Lily, and followed the sound. The hallway smelled the same as it did when I was a child, lemon cleaner and something colder. Institutional, at the far end. I saw a faint glow under the den door. I pushed it open gently. Paul was there, sitting alone in front of his laptop, scrubbing through footage. He didn't flinch when he saw me. He just tilted the screen slightly in my direction and said, "I thought you might want to see this." On the screen, my brother Derek stood in front of the breakfast buffet, smiling. Not the moment he slapped Lily, this was earlier. The prelude. He was adjusting his collar, murmuring to someone off camera. "She's going to do something emotional. She always does. It's like clockwork. Keep the shot wide. Makes for a better contrast when she breaks down. Then he chuckled. Trust me, she'll crack. She can't help it. I stood frozen. That wasn't a reaction. That was a setup. They planned it. Or at least expected it. And they were ready. The slap wasn't even the worst part. It was the fact that it had been anticipated, normalized, wrapped in a bow and filmed like some twisted family B-roll. Paul paused the video. There's more, he said. A lot more. And there were clips of my mother mocking Lily's voice while decorating cookies. Footage of my father calling me a charity case with delusions of grandeur when I wasn't around. In one particularly vile segment, Derek can be heard saying, "We just need to manage her image. No press tantrums, keep the kid quiet, and Audrey will fade like she always does." I sat down slowly. Not because I was shocked, because my legs gave out. That was the moment I realized I had made a critical error. I didn't come here as Audrey the adult. I came back as the child still wanting something from them: approval, apology, a place at the table. But that place didn't exist. It never did. The reunion wasn't about reconnecting. It was about control, reasserting the family brand, putting the loud black sheep back in her place, using Lily as a prop if needed. But I wasn't that child anymore, and neither was my daughter. The next morning, I told Lily we'd be leaving after breakfast. She didn't ask why. She just nodded and clung to my hand a little tighter before we left. Paul slipped me a flash drive, just in case. He said, "You deserve to have your own copy. I've seen enough documentaries to know this is how the lies get rewritten." I thanked him quietly. He didn't need to help me. He was married into this family, and complicity was the easier path, but he chose clarity, truth, in a world like ours. That made him radical. Back home, I tried to return to routine. I made Lily pancakes. I emailed work. I pretended the scar across my daughter's cheek wasn't burned into my memory. But that night, after she fell asleep, I opened Paul's flash drive and watched everything, every conversation, every slur, every backhanded insult spoken behind glassed smiles. By the end, I wasn't crying. I was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes after grief has burnt itself out and left only steel behind. I knew what I had to do, but I also knew I had to do it smart. Revenge is easy to imagine as loud and cinematic slamming doors, dramatic exposes. But that's not how you survive people like the Hardens. You don't shout them down, you outmaneuver them. You dismantle their power using their own tools. Derek was building a legacy brand, media presence, public image. That meant his armor was exposure, and I had something that could pierce it clean. I contacted a journalist I used to intern under back in college, Elise Tran. She ran an independent publication known for deep dives into toxic family systems, exploitation, and false narratives in media. I sent her a brief summary, some clips, and asked her to meet for coffee. 3 days later, we sat across from each other in a small cafe downtown. After 20 minutes, she looked up and said, "If half of this is true, it's a full-scale feature story. If all of it is true, it's a reckoning." We set terms. I wouldn't use real names until the final edit. She'd get full editorial control, but I'd retain ownership of the source material. And if the Hardens retaliated legally, I'd be ready with timestamps, consent forms, everything. But then something unexpected happened. Elise asked if she could speak with Lily. Only if she's comfortable. She said, "I just want to understand how this has impacted her." I hesitated. I didn't want Lily to relive it. But when I asked her, Lily surprised me. She said yes. During the interview, she didn't cry. She didn't shy away. She just looked straight into Elise's recorder and said, "I don't think they love Mom. And if they don't love her, then they don't love me either. But I love my mom, so that's enough." That night, I watched the interview on Elise's camcorder alone. Lily's little voice, so soft, so certain it broke something in me. Not in a bad way, in the way a cage breaks before someone steps out of it. I'd spent so many years hoping someone would speak up for me, but I never imagined it would be my daughter who finally did. Elise called 2 weeks later. The piece was going viral. The working title, The Family Brand That Hit Back. Within 72 hours, Derek's PR firm dropped him. Sponsors froze. A petition started for an ethics investigation into his real estate company, citing potential abusive environments and manipulation of minor participants in his media ventures. And I hadn't even gone public yet. I wasn't celebrating. Not yet, because exposure is just the first domino. Real power lies in who holds the narrative. Derek had money, he had lawyers, and he still had our parents. But for the first time in my life, I had something stronger. I had proof, I had allies, and I had my daughter's voice clear, unwavering, immortalized on camera. And now, I knew exactly how to use it. There's a very specific calm that comes with knowing exactly what you're going to do, and exactly why. It's not rage. It's not even revenge. It's more like purpose soaked in ice. Once Elise's article began to spread, I realized that we were only at the beginning of a much longer game. Public outrage was real, but outrage fades. The internet forgets, stories get buried, and perpetrators rebrand. Derek could wait it out, buy new PR, manipulate the silence like he always had. No, if I wanted justice, not just drama, I had to do more than expose him. I had to dismantle the structure that protected him in the first place. I had to make the very idea of being a Harden mean something different. It started with the will. I remembered something Paul had mentioned casually, almost in passing, that Dad Robert Harden had updated his estate planning last year, and Derek had taken a surprising interest in legacy documentation. It didn't sit right with me then, but I hadn't had the energy to chase it down. Now, it felt like a missing puzzle piece. My father was old and not as sharp as he used to be. Eleanor handled most of his appointments, and Derek had taken over financial coordination, whatever that meant. I suspected they'd quietly written me out of the will long ago, but that wasn't the point. The point was whether they'd done it legally. I called a former classmate from college. Lydia Tran, not related to Elise, just a weird coincidence. She was now an estate litigation attorney, tough as nails, and allergic to bullshit. I sent her a copy of the flash drive. I told her everything. She didn't blink. If they tampered with a signature or manipulated a cognitively impaired parent, she said, "We're talking civil and possibly criminal fraud, but we'll need access, records, witnesses, and preferably, something they didn't know you had." I had one thing, a voicemail. It was from 2 months ago. Before the reunion, my father had called me drunk, confused, rambling. He thought he was calling Derek. He said, and I quote, "If we're cutting her out, you need to promise me she won't find out until it's done. I don't want another mess like with your mother's sister. Keep Paul out of it too." He laughed, then coughed, then hung up. At the time, I'd written it off. Now it was a key. Lydia said it might be admissible, depending on the court. But at the very least, it would rattle them in arbitration. We decided on a strategy: don't strike yet. Let them feel safe. Let them believe the media storm was fading. Let them relax just long enough for me to move behind the scenes. Meanwhile, Elise connected me with a contact in nonprofit consulting. I told her I wanted to set up something real, something that would last longer than a trending article or a fleeting headline. I wanted to create a platform for children who were emotionally neglected or psychologically abused in high-control family systems. Not a shelter, not therapy, something different. A creative space, a media lab, a voice amplifier, a place where their stories could be told by them, not for them. We called it Lily's voice. Naming it after my daughter wasn't just symbolic. It was personal. It was the antidote to everything the Hardens had tried to erase. And when I told Lily, her eyes lit up not because she understood the legal structure, but because she understood the heart of it. So, other kids won't have to be quiet like I was, she asked. Exactly, I said. Within 3 weeks, we had a basic website, a mission statement, and a list of volunteer contributors. Elise ran a follow-up article. Donations came in. Slow at first, then rapidly. But more importantly, so did stories. From adults, from teens, from people who had never told anyone what happened behind their families' closed doors. And suddenly, this wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just about Lily, either. It was about truth, pattern recognition, breaking generational silences one voice at a time. But while all this unfolded, Derek made his move. He appeared on a morning show. One of those overly bright, overly polished talk shows with a 2-minute delay and coffee cups that never get sipped. He smiled, wore a navy suit, said he was deeply hurt by recent mischaracterizations, that family is complicated, and that he's choosing to take the high road. Then, the kicker: I have always tried to protect my niece and support my sister, despite our differences. The interview was slick, practiced, nauseatingly professional, and effective. Some people started asking if maybe I'd gone too far. Maybe I was exaggerating. Maybe I was unstable. One anonymous email even asked if Lily was acting in the video. That was the moment I understood Derek wasn't just defending himself. He was weaponizing doubt, turning reality into fog. So I decided to weaponize truth. With Lydia's help, I filed a motion to preserve the estate documents and freeze any asset transfers until a formal inquiry could be completed. Legally, it signaled I was serious. Emotionally, it sent a shockwave. The Harden name was now linked to potential elder exploitation. That's when the calls started from my mother. Of course, not to apologize, to warn. "You're destroying your father," she hissed through the phone. "He can't take this stress. And for what? You think anyone's going to believe you over your brother?" I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "They already do." She hung up. That night, Natalie texted me. "I'm not supposed to say anything, but there's a draft version of a will in the home office. It has your name removed, dated before the latest evaluation with his neurologist. If you get that document, you'll see everything." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I called Paul. We planned it together. It wasn't a break-in. Not really. It was a visit. A daughter checking on her aging father. Eleanor was at her weekly bridge club. Derek was at a conference. And I had Paul's camera rolling quietly, discreetly. Dad didn't recognize me at first, but once he did, he softened. Age had withered some of his arrogance, or maybe I was just seeing him with new eyes. We made tea, talked awkwardly, then, carefully, I asked him about the will. He blinked. "What about it?" "Do you remember what's in it?" He paused. "Of course. You, Derek, the grandkids, all of you. Why?" That was all I needed to hear. With Paul distracting him in the den, I walked to the study and found the locked drawer. The key was still taped to the underside of the desk, just like when I was a teenager sneaking cookies from the liquor cabinet. Inside were 2 folders. One dated 14 months ago, with both Derek's and Eleanor's signatures as witnesses. The other dated 3 months ago, unsigned, but with full distribution including me and Lily. I took photos of both, sent them to Lydia. She confirmed what I suspected: the older version had questionable legality, especially if my father didn't recall updating it. The newer one, even unsigned, was a problem for them. Because it proved intent and lack of full mental clarity during the prior execution, It was time to act, not just legally, but publicly. Because if they wanted a battle of narratives, they were about to get one. Everything about the Hardens revolved around control, not just of people, but of the narrative. Control who speaks, what's said, how it's remembered. That's how they survived for so long. They edited history in real time, erased uncomfortable truths, smoothed over jagged edges with polite smiles and charity dinners. And for years, I let them. I let them shape me in absentia, cast me as the failure who drifted away, the unstable daughter who couldn't handle a strong family culture. But now, I had the footage, I had the documentation, and more importantly, I had the momentum. It was time to wrest the pen from their hand and rewrite the story myself, frame by frame. I started with a video, just under 4 minutes. Black background, no music, just me, sitting across from the camera with Paul behind the lens. I didn't dress up, no makeup. I wore the same blue hoodie I'd had since college. I wanted raw, not rehearsed. I looked into the lens and said, "You've heard their version. Now here's mine." I talked about the reunion, what happened to Lily, the slap, the silence. I spliced in Derek's on-camera confession before the incident, him instructing his crew to keep the shot wide when she cracks. I played the voicemail from Dad, his confused instructions to hide the will change. I included the freeze frame of Lily's stunned little face after Derek's hand hit her cheek. No commentary, just truth, at the end. I said one line they taught me not to cry in public. So now, I'm speaking instead. Within 24 hours, it had over 600,000 views. By the end of the week, 3.1 million. Comments flooded in, not just with support, but with recognition. Hundreds of women and men saying they saw themselves in that video. In that silence, in the performance of happy families that hid years of private cruelty. And with every new message, I felt the shame melt further. I was never alone. I had just been kept isolated long enough to believe I was. But not everyone was thrilled. Derek's camp fired back fast. His attorney issued a cease and desist claiming defamation, citing manipulated footage and malicious editing. They threatened to sue. Elise stepped in with her legal team and calmly reminded them of fair use, public interest protections, and the fact that everything shown was backed by time-stamped, unaltered originals, and just in case, we had multiple backups on cloud, drive, and offline hardware. That wasn't just smart, it was necessary. Derek had money, reach, and a history of rewriting reality. I had Paul and the truth. Then came the media war. Tabloids picked it up. A viral TikTok creator with 6 million followers reenacted the slap scene using stuffed animals, titled, "When Your Uncle's a Narcissist but Still Has a PR Team." Public sympathy leaned heavily toward me, but more importantly, toward Lily. Viewers weren't just angry on my behalf. They were protective of her. She became a symbol of innocence being crushed, and resilience shining through. And still, we didn't stop. Lydia filed a formal petition to challenge the will. She added the video as supplementary evidence establishing pattern, motive, and potential coercion. That opened the door to discovery, which meant subpoenaing family medical records, financial statements, and private correspondences within a week. Eleanor's carefully buried history began to unravel. Turns out, this wasn't the first time she'd restructured estate documents behind closed doors. In 2004, she'd done something similar with her late sister's trust, quietly siphoning funds toward Derek's business startup under the guise of temporary investment. The paper trail was faint, but it was there. Elise's team ran with it, publishing a scathing follow-up titled, "Behind the Pearls, the Quiet Matriarch Who Silenced Generations." That was when the real fractures started to show. Natalie, Derek's wife, filed for legal separation, citing irreconcilable values, Paul confirmed she'd been emotionally sidelined for years, especially once she questioned Derek's tactics. The house of cards was tilting. Derek's real estate firm lost its biggest investor. His board demanded a leave of absence. And Eleanor, she went silent. No statements, no denials, just retreat. Maybe she knew the battle was lost. Maybe she was planning her next move. But for now, she was off the board. And yet, I didn't feel triumphant, just steady. This wasn't about winning. It was about excavation, unearthing every lie they'd buried and holding it up to light until it turned to dust. It was about building something in its place that wasn't made of rot. So I kept working. Lily's voice expanded rapidly. We partnered with 2 local schools to offer after-school storytelling workshops. Elise helped us launch a podcast, giving survivors a platform to speak without filters. I hired a small staff, 2 social workers, 1 creative director, and Paul as lead archivist. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same man who once filmed our family's darkest hour was now helping document the healing of dozens. But there was one thing left. My father, the man who once told me I was too emotional to lead, was now confined to a wheelchair, mentally fading in and out. The neurologist's report Lydia obtained confirmed mild to moderate cognitive impairment. He wasn't the mastermind anymore, just the last pillar of a crumbling temple. And I didn't know what I wanted from him: acknowledgement, apology, or maybe just closure. So I visited. Not with cameras, not with lawyers, just me and Lily. He didn't recognize me at first. Called me Eleanor once, but when I sat close, held his hand, and said, "It's Audrey." Something shifted. His eyes flickered, like a film strip trying to align. "Audrey," he whispered, "you were always so loud." It wasn't cruel, just factual, like weather, like gravity. I had to be, I said. No one listened otherwise. He nodded, not in understanding, just agreement. And then he said something that cracked me open in the most unexpected way. "She looks like you, your daughter." Lily was across the room, drawing in her little sketch pad. She looked up, smiled shyly. "That's Lily," I told him. He blinked again. "Lily." "Then tell her, sorry." I don't know if he meant it, or if he was just trying out the word. But I nodded anyway. "I will." It didn't heal me. It didn't erase anything. But it was the first time in my entire life that my father had ever said sorry. To anyone. And that, oddly, felt like enough. As we walked out of the house, no longer a battlefield, just an old frame sagging under the weight of its own secrets, I felt Lily slip her hand into mine. "You okay, Mom?" I looked down at her, the girl who started it all, who reminded me who I was, who gave me the courage to fight back when I wanted to disappear. "I am now," I said. But even then, I knew something wasn't finished yet, not completely. There was one final decision I still had to make about whether to forgive them, or to bury them forever. Closure isn't what you think it is. It's not a grand scene where the villain begs for forgiveness and you get to walk away triumphant with swelling music in the background. It's not even about forgiveness, really. It's about choosing what you carry forward and what you refuse to let follow you anymore. In the weeks after visiting my father, everything began to settle into a strange stillness. Not peace, not yet, but stillness. Like the last gust of wind after a storm, the estate inquiry entered formal litigation. The documents I uncovered, along with Dad's medical records, gave Lydia enough leverage to challenge the legitimacy of the will. Whether I'd be included again didn't matter. The point was to expose the process, the manipulation, the quiet engineering behind the scenes that Derek and Eleanor had orchestrated for years. The court ordered a freeze on all Harden family assets pending investigation. Suddenly, Derek's empire wasn't just cracking, it was hemorrhaging. But while the legal process ground forward slowly, another transformation was taking place this time. In public, Lily's voice had taken on a life of its own. What began as a small, symbolic act of resistance had become a movement. I watched girls and boys from all walks of life step into a studio with shaky voices and guarded eyes, then leave with their heads a little higher. Their stories finally heard. One girl, 15, recorded a spoken-word poem about her father telling her she was too dramatic. Another boy described how his family mocked him for crying when his dog died. These weren't headlines. These weren't scandals. These were the soft wounds that never made it to courtrooms but lived inside people for decades. And each time someone spoke, I thought of Lily, and I thought of myself, and how many years we had spent thinking we were the only ones. Elise asked me to join her on a panel for a national summit on digital storytelling and healing trauma. I agreed. I stood on a stage with 4 other women activists, artists, and one former foster youth turned author, and I told our story. Not just the slap, not just the footage, but the generational machine behind it all. I spoke about image, manipulation, performance, the way families sometimes brand themselves like companies, and discard those who don't fit the brand. I spoke of silent kitchens, fake smiles, empty apologies, and the ways women like Eleanor could smile sweetly while orchestrating cruelty like a symphony. And when I finished, a woman in the front row stood up, wiping her cheeks. She said, "Thank you. You gave words to something I felt my whole life but didn't know how to name." That was the moment I realized this was bigger than justice. This was language reclamation, naming what once had no name, turning vague discomfort into visible truth. But truth has consequences, always. About 2 months after the summit, I received a letter, handwritten. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, expensive. Inside was a note from Eleanor. Just 1 page, her handwriting still flawless, still cold. She wrote that she'd seen the videos, that I had embarrassed the family, that my actions had ruined Derek's future and brought shame to your father's final years. But at the end, she added 1 line that hit harder than all the rest. I suppose this is what happens when a daughter refuses to forgive. I stared at the sentence for a long time, not because I was shocked, but because it confirmed something I'd always known. For people like her, forgiveness wasn't about healing. It was about silence, compliance, amnesia disguised as grace. And I wasn't going to give her that, not anymore. I didn't respond to the letter. I didn't need to. My silence this time was not weakness, it was clarity. A line drawn, not out of hatred, but out of health. And there's a difference. Weeks later, the court ruled that the older version of the will was invalid due to cognitive manipulation and lack of informed consent. The unsigned version, the one including me and Lily, was entered into record as a reflection of original intent. It wasn't a victory about money. Frankly, the assets had already lost most of their value in legal fees and public fallout. What mattered was that the pattern was named, documented, a matter of record. And with that, something inside me finally let go. Not because I forgot, but because I no longer needed to prove anything. The house, our old lake house, was listed for sale by court-appointed trustees. I didn't fight to keep it. Let it go. Let the walls that heard our silences be someone else's problem. Let the rooms that held my shame get remodeled, repainted, repurposed. I didn't need a monument to my pain. I had something better now. I had space, voice, autonomy. And Lily. She was thriving. She joined a youth choir at school, started writing her own songs, wore her hair however she wanted. One day, I found her teaching a smaller girl how to sing in harmony. When I asked what they were working on, she said, "It's a song about feeling safe, that's when I knew whatever I had to burn to give her this space, it was worth it. I kept working with Elise, with Paul, with our tiny team. We began documenting not just stories of trauma, but also recovery. Girls reconciling with mothers, fathers learning to listen, brothers writing apologies they once thought they'd never give. Not every story ended in estrangement. Some ended in repair, in redefinition. That's what healing looks like. Not always reunion, sometimes evolution, sometimes boundary, sometimes love. Yes, but finally on terms that don't erase anyone. One afternoon, Elise asked me if I had any regrets. I thought about it, about the years lost, about Lily's tears, about how hard it had been to stand in that house again and not scream. And then I said, no, because for the first time, I'm not living a story someone else wrote for me. She nodded. That's rare. And I believed her. And yet, there's one more thing I need to say, because I know someone out there is listening right now, wondering if they should do the same. Speak up. Challenge the story. Say the unsayable. I know they're afraid of being disbelieved, of losing what little family they have left, of being called bitter, angry, vengeful. I know because I was all those things once. But here's what I learned: staying silent to protect people who harm you isn't loyalty. It's self-erasure. And you don't owe anyone your silence, especially not the ones who taught you to think of love as pain wrapped in politeness. So, no, I don't forgive them, at least not in the way they want. I don't forget. I don't condone. But I've stopped bleeding for their comfort. I've stopped shrinking for their approval. And that, to me, is a deeper form of closure than any apology could ever offer. Now, when Lily asks me what family means, I say this: family is who listens, who believes you, who protects your softness, not punishes it, who shows up when you sing, not just when you're silent. And she smiles and sings louder. Because this isn't just a revenge story, it's a rebuilding story. And I built something no one, not even the Hardens, can tear down again.